welcome to my channel, So Ashley. Today we're doing a spring thrift flip. This one's a little bit more advanced, or I guess intermediate. So I have 3 outfits for you today. So let's get started. It's finally spring and the sun is out. And I think it's time for my closet to get a little refresh. So here's what I have. I have this, which used to be a dress, and I was gonna use it on this trip that I went on so long ago, like 2 years ago. But I already cut it. Whoops, never finished it. So we're gonna finish that one. So this white dress is already cut in half, so I'm gonna make it into a 2-piece and add a scrunch to the side of the skirt and to the center of the top. And then I have this green cardigan. What should we do with it? Maybe a butterfly top? Ooh. That's a trend. For this cardigan, I'm gonna cut it into a bunch of pieces in order to make it into this butterfly top and shawl combo. It's inspired by this super expensive top that I saw on Pinterest. And then I have this really cute floral skirt, which is too big for me and very churchy, if you will. I'd probably make a 2-piece. This skirt is too long for my liking, so with the extra fabric that I cut off, I'm gonna make a bustier top. Starting with the white dress, since it was already cut in half, I just needed to add a thick elastic band to each raw edge. So I measured for the one around my rib cage and cut that. And then another one for my waistband. Well, I ran out of white thread, so I'm just gonna use gray for this. Not bad. Next, I just sewed the elastic band to itself so it would make a circle. And I just sew a square for extra hold. Next, I just marked it into equal quarters. And then pin that to the top at the side seams in the center front and center back. Then I sewed that on to the very edge with a zigzag stitch until I ran out of bobbin thread. Are you joking? And then I got back to sewing.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Here's how that looked. And then I just folded the elastic inward and pinned it in place. And then I sewed that again with the zigzag stitch, a 1/2 inch from the edge.
Let's begin now.
Then I took a little tiny piece of elastic and pinned it to the center front of the top. I also sewed that on with a zigzag stitch, using a shorter piece of elastic, and stretching it while sewing will create that scrunched look. After sewing that on, I wasn't really happy with the amount of scrunch that I got, and I am a psycho, so I seam ripped it and did it again.
Repeat,
This time I cut off about 1 inch of it and then pinned it on in the same place. Again, sewing it down the center with the zigzag stitch.
Is that all you got?
Let's begin now.
And it was much scrunchier this time. Next was the skirt, and I did the same thing, sewing the elastic together into a circle first, and then zigzag stitching it on and folding it over to zigzag stitch again. For the top stitch, I sewed about 3/4 of an inch from the edge.
What up?
To add the scrunch to the skirt, I used this pre-made spandex cord string stuff that's usually used for swimsuit strings and ties. Then I needed a strip of fabric to create the channels to hold the string, so I used this white spandex that I had, and I cut a 2-inch strip the same length as the skirt. Then I pinned it to the inside of the skirt, down the center of the strip, aligning it with the side seam. Then I sewed it on with a straight stitch from the outside following the side seam, all the way from the waistband to the hem. It looks a little waggly, but that's okay, it's just gonna get scrunched up. Next I added channels on either side, a 1/4 inch from that center seam. And here's how it looked with both channels. Next, to keep the strings from fraying, I melted the ends with a lighter. This only works with synthetic fabric. Next, I used a safety pin to push the strings through the channels. Once they were through, I pinned them at the top and secured them in place with a straight stitch. Then I just trimmed some excess fabric from the sides and it was done. All I had to do was scrunch it up and tie a bow. Our next garment to tackle is this green cardigan, and for this one I decided draping would be the easier way to go. So I put it on my dress form and started hacking away to create the shawl first, and I just cut the whole bottom off up to the armpit, leaving the sleeves intact. And then I cut off the collar. Then I tried it on myself and pinned it to make the sleeves a little tighter, and I think I took an inch off the sleeve all the way from pit to wrist. I sewed it inside out and then sliced off all the extra fabric. And then I measured how much I needed to create the tie in the front. Then I cut out 2 of these sort of scoopy triangular pieces. And I pinned and sewed them to the front of the shawl at about a 1/4 inch. Next, I had to take the rest of the fabric and figure out how to make a top out of it. So I just started draping with my laptop open so I could reference the sketch. I had to go in and cut away the extra fabric. I I tried my best to create the little wings at the bottom so it would be one piece, but I really didn't like the shape or the way they turned out, so I just cut them off. I cut a matching piece out of the excess fabric using that left side as a template. Then I sewed it all together and created two little scrunches in the front using the same elastic method. Then I pinned it back on the dress form to see how it turned out. And for the back, I just sewed on a rectangle, and then I cleaned up the sides and the hem a little bit. Then I put it back on the dress form and fixed the neckline a little bit. Then I did that psycho thing again and seam ripped the elastic to redo it. I also added elastic to the neckline for stability. Then I cut some strips out to create the halter ties. And I sewed those on at 1/2 inch. Then it went back on the mannequin one more time so that I could drape the wings to make this a real butterfly top. And I just pinned 5 big strips on and then afterwards trimmed them down to the shape that I wanted. Then I took each of those triangular pieces and finished them with the lettuce edge by doing a zigzag stitch over the edge and stretching it hard as I sewed. Then I pinned all the pieces on right sides together and sewed them on with the zigzag stitch at 1/2 inch. And here's how it turned out. Our last thrift flip starts with this skirt, and I just pinned the sides to fit my waist, and then marked where I wanted the length to be. Then I evened out the marks with a ruler and sliced off the bottom with a rotary cutter. Then I just took in the sides with a straight stitch, sewing right sides together where I marked it. I didn't like how flared it was, so I took it in a little bit more. Then I sliced off the extra seam allowance and went over the edge with a zigzag stitch to clean it up. Then I hemmed the bottom of the skirt the tiniest bit that I could, which was about 1/2 inch. Then I sewed that down from the inside using a zigzag stitch to go over that raw edge. I used this pattern for the top, which was a lot more work than the skirt. In order to get all my pattern pieces to fit, I had to seam rip the original hem for more surface area. Then I pinned all my pattern pieces on with the fabric folded. and I cut them out to get 2 of each piece. Before starting sewing, I ironed all of the pieces. And for the lining, I used this old curtain. And I just pinned and cut the same pattern pieces out of that curtain. Starting with the outer fabric, I sewed it together starting from the center front, working my way out. And I sewed each seam at 1/2 inch. Then I pressed all the seams open. Then I did the same thing with the lining fabric, starting with the center front seam and working my way out. Then I lined them up and trimmed them so they matched better. And before sewing the channels, I pinned the pieces right sides together and sewed along the top at 1/4 inch to create a clean finish at the top. I trimmed it down a bit and flipped it right sides out and pressed it flat. I top stitched along the top edge at about 1/8 of an inch. Then I sewed down the center of each seam to start the channels. Then I sewed a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch on either side of every seam. Here's how the channels look. Then I trimmed off all the excess threads, which was kind of satisfying. Now here's where it gets a little psycho again, okay? Instead of buying plastic boning, I decided to use this weed whacker cord, and I just cut a bunch of pieces that were all the same length. And then I trimmed them down to fit into the bustier. I didn't end up putting boning in every single channel because I didn't want it to be too stiff. Once I had all my boning pieces, I just melted the ends a little bit with a lighter so they wouldn't stab through the fabric. Then I slid them into the channels, sometimes using the next one to help push it all the way in. This is one of my favorite parts of the process. To finish the rest of the edges, I cut out 2-inch strips of fabric. And then I pressed those strips into something that resembles bias tape. The longer strip is for the bottom edge, and then the 2 smaller ones are for the center back pieces. I pinned it on, sort of sandwiching the fabric strip around the bottom edge. And then I just top stitched it on close to that open edge, probably about a 1/4 inch from the bottom edge. And then I did the same thing with the back pieces, folding the raw edges under. Then it was finally time to add the closures. So I pressed the center back inwards and stitched it down with enough space to add my grommets. I laid them out and marked where to cut them with a pen. Then I cut the hole for the first one, and I figured out which way looked better. And then I just hammered it in there. And then I did the same thing 7 more times. And I think they turned out really clean looking. The last thing to do was add the ribbon. So I had this lavender ribbon already, and I just laced it up like a shoe.
Make a loop-de-loop and pull, and your shoes are looking cool.
And then I cut the ends and sealed them with a lighter. That's all I have for you guys. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you thought of these thrift flips in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.